All right, welcome back to the Tactical Pause podcast. I'm Kevin Price.
I'm Kevin Reed.
And if you haven't done so already, I definitely encourage you to subscribe to the channel. It's really the best way to support what we're doing here. So today we're joined by Dr. Marvin E. Johnson, U.S. Army veteran, former EOD, and a leader in mental health and community development with over 30 years of experience. He's the executive director of Alaska Mental Health Consumer Web and host of Raising Kings Academy, where he focuses on guiding young men and supporting single mothers raising boys. We're glad to have him with us today. Marvin, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. And I wanted to jump right in. I've been watching your podcast, Raising Kings Academy. And what was the inspiration behind your podcast? And what do you feel the overall goal or message is there?
Okay, yeah. So the reason I started Raising Kings Academy is I've always seen there's been kind of like an argument between like, can a single mom raise a man or boy or stuff like that? And what I felt that is that like, yes, they could raise the kid or the young man, but like, could they really help him become a young man? So basically, like I would say, like if I was raising a daughter, I would definitely need the help of a female to enable to help her develop into a young woman. So that was kind of the story that kind of like birthed Raising Kings. And I also wanted to kind of really take it out of that argument kind of status where there a lot of times it gets cut off because it's like, well, you're saying I can't do it. No, we're not saying that you can't do that, but like, what are going to be the things that you're going to help him develop into a young man? So that's kind of like what birthed it.
Absolutely. And do you feel like social media and the type of environment we're in these days hinders young men a lot when it comes to developing like that?
Well, yeah, I think like 100% because I think that there's a gender war going on, really, but like I think that like a lot of folks are looking from the female side of like, I'm independent, I can do everything all by myself and all those types of things. And so that's where it kind of like the argument kind of comes in. And I feel like trying to take that influence out and really taking it out of that kind of combative type of conversation where young mothers, as I continue to build this platform, is that the young mothers could really come to a safe space where they could actually ask for help and they could do it anonymously and stuff like that so that they don't feel any type of way confrontation or anything like that. So yeah, so I think yeah, definitely social media has a big influence on why it's needed to offer that space for that group.
I was going to ask, do you find that I had just recently watched this documentary by Louis Theroux on Netflix about the manosphere. And as a person who's not in that environment, I was really
Yeah.
shocked that there are these people who are saying the most ridiculous things, but because there's almost an absence of a counterbalance at home, the children seem to believe that. Do you find that that is also something similar that you run with or you run into with your organization as well?
Yeah, I've actually had a couple of personal experiences, and I mean, it sounds like a little thing, but I'll just kind of give a quick example. When I was raising my sons, and basically, I had some single mothers that also had sons, and so at that point, there was an engineering conference coming to town. And I volunteered to say, like, hey, you know what? I'm taking my sons. I can take your sons to the conference. And I was told, like, by the mother was like, no, I got this over here. I don't need someone to step in and do anything for my son. And I was really kind of taken aback by it because I'm like, that I have no intention of literally raising your son. I was just like looking at as a place to give your son exposure. And that's one of the things that I feel that's really missing because that you can't get that balance because if you're kind of like looking at it from a one-sided kind of point of view. And so, and the balance is like so important. And so what I always tell like young mothers like that, what you can't see today, it'll show up tomorrow. And then like you'll wonder why that these things are happening because, those opportunities were missed.
You talked about women being independent these days. And that's a thing I see a lot. Back in the day, used to be the man goes to work, the wife stays home. But nowadays, women are a lot more independent, which is a great thing. It's an
Yeah.
absolutely great thing. However, I think some men don't know how to handle that. And maybe because it makes them feel inferior or what have you. Is that something that you try to address when you talk about this subject?
Oh yeah, I think the one reason why I kind of like really approached that is because I looked at myself first. Even though I was, married at one point, the thing that I learned definitely coming out of raising my kids and stuff was that I needed to show up better as a man. So that means that I needed to do some work on myself to basically kind of like remove some of the things that like you know, definitely generational that we were taught, like don't express yourself, don't, have feelings, tough, you fall down, don't cry, all of those types of things. And I feel like what I learned is that those things are really, really painful. So that was one of the things that I led into was that like if I could show that even when we talk about independence, is that like even everybody, I believe, needs help at some point. And so, and you don't do a lot of things by yourself. And I said, like, it's okay to be independent, as you mentioned before, but there is no shame in being able to having enough maturity to ask for help. And so that's kind of like what I try to model.
Yeah, you said that a lot about mental health. Are you able to also kind of reach some of these young men before some of these smaller mental health issues balloon into like the full blown big ones that we see in some of these adults or young adults later in life?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question because like actually some of those things have like led me down a path where I'm actually waiting on a decision to enroll in a program to become an actual therapist. So I've done a couple things. And one of the reasons why I've done that is because like I'll tell you when I was in Texas and I transitioned out of engineering into like education and I taught high school, I could see that students had a lot of things going on beyond just getting down to the work. And so just so happened I had worked out in the psychology department at Prairie View A&M, and I didn't consider myself a therapist or anything like that or a psychologist, but like I was able to really connect with students and definitely young men based on some of the things that I was just kind of absorbing as working in that environment. So then like to fast forward that, I moved to Alaska and I taught in a village had about 600 people in the whole town. I had about 81 students, and I taught from seventh grade to 12th grade. So I taught like every grade level, 7 to 12 for math. And what I was realizing was there were similar mental health issues, but like they were even deeper out in the village because of the kind of intergenerational trauma. And there's a lot of trauma that Alaska Natives face as well. So that put me on a path to really kind of focus on making sure that like, can we get the student to a level where they're even ready to learn? So that was kind of the start of it. And really kind of got me really more deep into it was like the semester before I left. I actually ended up losing a student to suicide.
Mhm. I'm so
So
sorry.
yeah, thank you. And so that really, really made me dig in there a little bit deeper because like just really quickly, the weekend before he committed suicide, he came by my class like Friday and like I was the last one there, everybody's gone from the school and he's talking to me. So like, I mean, I kind of look back on it just like, what he was just saying goodbye, but I didn't know that he was going to be gone for, forever. So anyway, I really started to focus on like, well, I wanted to do some more work to really help students like that and just young men for sure.
Did you find that there was a struggle in sort of understanding unique challenges for certain students based on that they were Inuit or indigenous to the land? Or is it just, if you get down to the brass tacks, is it pretty much a common theme, I guess is what I'm trying to say? Or are there things that we all should learn and take into account?
Okay, yeah. I actually saw a lot of similarities, but then there were some big differences too. But like the similarities that I saw, I chose to, when I was in Texas, I chose to go to the inner city neighborhood. And so I was teaching in a Title I low income school. And I focused on, I mean, I taught all the students, but like I definitely tuned into the young Black males. And so what I found out when I got to Alaska Native young males, there were a lot of similarities into how they kind of like approached education. And so I kind of like began to help them to really just desire to do anything after high school, whether it was a trade or whether it was the military, whether it was going to school. So I worked on those things. Kind of a big difference with the indigenous and the Alaska Native community is the fact that they're kind of, in my opinion, they're kind of like in a tug of war between Western education and subsistence, and so and living in the village. So it's basically like the elders were like, okay, I do want you to get some Western education, but I don't want you to leave the village. I want you to retain the culture. So it can be very confusing, and so. So one of the things that I did was I tried to get them involved in like trying to solve problems in their village. You could go away and get their education, but you could come back here if you're like, trying to solve a problem or something that you would like to improve your village. So that's kind of how I approach that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I wanted to circle back to something you said earlier about young men, as they develop, there's a stigma around being a man and sort of showing emotion and
Yes.
opening up about things. And I'm no psychologist, but the men that I've seen that have trouble with that a lot of times tend to be extremely insecure and
Yeah.
lack a certain amount of confidence. And you also see a similar stigma in the military when people
Yeah.
deal with mental health issues like post-traumatic stress.
Hmm.
It used to be an issue of, if I say something, then I'm weak. But I
Yeah.
think suicide in the military has become a big thing. I know Kevin and I
Yeah.
both know a number of people, unfortunately,
Yeah.
that have taken their own life. So, do you find there is a stigma behind that on whether it be on the
Yeah.
on either front,
Yeah, I do. And I actually use my first military story a lot of times with young men because like I felt like this was my first test of really understanding. I mean, I didn't know a lot of stuff back then, but like to understand the power of like being able to express yourself. So I come from a family of seven, so I was the first. I was the third child. And so my sister went to college, and like there wasn't a whole lot of money for her. So I was like, well, if I want to go to college, then I'm probably gonna have to do another route. So I went to the military. Anyway, the recruiter comes to pick me up to take me to the bus station back then. So I'm looking on the porch and all my siblings are there, my mom and dad are there, and like I'm like, oh man, I'm really leaving. So something's happening here. And there was a lump in my throat. I'm like, I wanted to cry so bad, but I was like, I'm gonna be a soldier. I can't cry. I can't do this. Be a man, don't cry and stuff like that. So anyway, we leave there. Then the recruiter drops me at the bus station, and I'm like, okay, now the recruiter's gone. So now I'm on this bus. I'm in South Carolina. I'm going from Greenville, South Carolina to Columbia, which is like 100 miles by bus, and going to check into basic. And I basically kept that lump all the way down to Columbia. I never cried, but like it was so painful. So I always start there because I said, like, well, I say it's more being a man when you're able to express your emotions and you're able to, because you're a human being, so you're not a machine or something like that. So that's kind of like where I start. And then the other thing, I was teaching running a camp at Texas Southern, and it was sixth to eighth grade. It was like mostly Black and Hispanic males. One of the things that I learned, and I knew that I was growing and maturing, is because at that point in time, I think there were a lot of things going on where people of color, they're getting struck down in the streets and stuff like that. And I think that probably was a little bit before Trayvon Martin and stuff like that. But one of the things that like we got to a point where they were, not being sixth to eighth grade young males. And so I basically was able to corral them and kind of get them to pay attention. And one of the things that I said was that like I really like I'm kind of getting tired of seeing you guys shot down in the streets and stuff like that. And and I said one of the things that I wanted to, and I used a story that was on at that time about them controlling their emotions. And so there was a incident that happened in Florida where I think it was a black man that had a 4-year-old son and his wife, and then the wife was arguing over a parking space, and so yeah, and so the guy, the black male, comes out, and instead of like kind of like hey, like, what's going on? Like, talking it out or whatever. He just kind of like runs up on the guy. And so just so happens that the guy goes back to his car and then he gets his weapon and then that's it. We as men, we have to be able to control our emotions. These are different times. These are different times. I mean, even if you're on a highway and you're talking about road rage and stuff like that, it's like, you know what? Just go ahead. Just go ahead. I'd rather you come home. So that was the message that I wanted to tell them. And then like I told them, I said, I love each and every one of you, right? And so I could not imagine myself saying that years ago, but like I had matured to a point where these are the things that I think are more representative of a man. A man is able to control his emotions, is also able to express his emotions.
What are some things that you run through the students with at No Kings Academy? How do you help young men develop those skills?
Well, I'm working through the mothers. So I'm not at the point yet where I will directly work with the young men because I feel like the most important part right now is with the moms and like letting them know that, hey, you know what, you got a resource. And I think of probably a lot of us, whether our home situation, I was fortunate enough to have my father and mom around, but like even though the ones that didn't or the ones that would like young men that would stay with us because we would take in people all the time, it was like, if you don't have the father around, have an uncle, have a coach or whatever. So I want to let the moms know that like it's okay to reach out to other men that are responsible that you can trust and that to help your son. So that's the main focus right now.
And I think another stigma that I see a lot, is, especially when it comes to mental health, it comes from like marginalized communities. A lot of people tend to think that these mental health issues don't touch those communities, uh, but
Yeah.
that's not true. Like a young black man isn't going to commit suicide, or a minority is not
Yeah.
going to commit suicide, which is absolutely
Right.
not true. It is
That's correct.
absolutely not. But I think that's a falsity that probably creeps up in those situations. And how do you feel like we do better about communicating stuff like that? Because when you're in a poverty-stricken
Yeah.
situation or a marginalized community, you deal with a lot of stress, so you then feel like you have to be tougher or thicker skinned. And so you
Yeah.
end up burying those emotions. So how do we deal with getting across
That,
there?
yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good question because like and actually before I left Houston area, there was an idea. I actually had created a nonprofit that I had this idea of connecting with definitely more African Americans in our community through the barbershop. It's a little different up here, but like we're trying to do the same thing. Basically, when I was in Texas, when I went to visit the barbershop, I started to observe that like sometimes a lot of single mothers would drop their sons off at the barbershop because they felt it was safe. There were men in there that were of all types of levels and walks of life. to be in that business as a barber, you got to have a mouthpiece, and you got to connect with people. And so a lot of times what would happen is that there was like mentoring going on there basically for free, which was great. We kept up with like students' athletics, their academics, if they had questions about what they wanted to become, or and so like a lot of times my barber would really kind of like speak me up. I've done a lot of things, but like I'm not a braggadocious person or anything like that. So, but it was like somebody's going into the military. It's like, well, do you know that he was like an EOD? He was on the bomb squad and stuff like that. And so then I'll have a conversation with that young man. Then they say like, oh, do you know that this person wants to be an engineer? And then I would talk with them as well. So that is how we were kind of bridging that gap. And I think, well, I'm actually invited to this group sometime in May where because it's like it's very few of us here, but we're going to try to bring it together where we're going to have those kind of conversations in the barbershop. So that's been one of the really conduits that we've been trying to use because it's definitely a safe space. And I think we've really been pushing each other to really trying to open up, like not only with those types of things, even like with health. It's kind of like we kind of address like, hey, you know what? You had a colonoscopy, you had your prostate check, like you had your labs for diabetes or stuff like that. So, and I always tell young people today, I said like, a lot of my uncles and aunts and stuff like in my generation, they basically passed away from stuff that could have been treated, but like, there was just no communication and no talk about it, and then there was confusion about it because like I always tell people when in my hometown where my grandmother was, it was very rural, but like they were always say like, well, your aunt has the sugar and stuff like that, and I had no idea what that was, and I was like I'm straight scared to drink Kool-Aid or whatever, I don't know. So but now we're talking and more educated about it, and like really so it's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the ways that you describe growing up where men just bottle their feelings. I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, to two parents who weren't expecting a kid. We grew up very poor
Okay.
until we moved away to rural Missouri, and then finally the money went a bit farther. But I remember that being very common for men throughout the neighborhood. It was more like your job is to provide, and
Hmm.
your job is to come home and provide for that family, and
Yeah.
nothing else should matter to you. And I'm obviously not exposed to other ethnic communities, but I kind of get the sense that that's kind of the same across
Yeah.
the poorer socioeconomic classes.
Yeah.
If you come from a lower socioeconomic class, that tends to be the trend. Have you noticed that as well?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I've been like really happy about myself is really committing to breaking the cycle. Because yeah, because I definitely come from a lot of that. Even when I was in high school, I was in a predominantly white high school, and just so happened that God gave me a little bit of intelligence, so I was in some of the smart classes and stuff like that. So I had to kind of navigate both of those worlds. And then like I would say in the ninth grade, I had my physical science teacher. She also later became my physics teacher, but like she was basically, I was trying to hang with a lot of my colleagues that were not really focused on education. And so they would always call me out. And like, so it was like a badge of shame to be smart. But like one day she just stopped me and she said, hey, you know what? That's not you. And for some reason I listened. So really good. And from that point on, I really kind of like, I was able to kind of like live in both of those worlds, but like I knew that I had to keep focused on that. So
Well, something I didn't mention earlier in your bio, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a mouthful. You're a
yeah,
commissioner on HAND, which is Housing and
yeah,
Homelessness Neighborhood Development, correct?
correct. Yes.
And do you see any connection between the mental health that we're talking about, whether it be with young men or veterans or what have you, and the homelessness population?
Oh yeah, yeah. In my role at the consumer web, so the consumer web is basically a drop-in center for the homeless, actually. So that was in addition to being on the commission. So, and actually, one of the things that like got me to at least apply to be on the commission, and then I got appointed to the commission was the fact that like I've seen homelessness in every state, and I've lived in a lot of different states and stuff like that. And then coming from a engineering background, I love solving problems and stuff like that. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe if I get onto there, maybe I could help solve some of the problems. And so that was kind of the push. And then like one of the things that I was able to do when I decided to pursue my doctorate in higher education, that gave me the kind of the mix of the science and math and all that stuff with the kind of the social sciences and stuff like that. It kind of gave me an epiphany that like I can use all this stuff to actually help people. So that was one of the reasons why I pushed to get onto the commission. And when I was at the web, I actually realized, I mean, I developed even a higher level of compassion and a level of seeing human beings and not people that were homeless or stuff like that. Because like, and like there were a couple veterans that were there. And so, which was really, and then there were a couple pilots and stuff like so what it gave me a picture of is like, of course, folks can come from all different types of levels and walks of life. And basically, a lot of us are really like one paycheck away from being out on the street. So that really kind of opened my eyes up with that. And so, and then the mental health part, which led to me finally seeking to become a therapist, was the fact that like when I worked at the web, basically up here, Alaska Behavioral Health, they were right across the street. And then also on my staff, I had these roles called peer mentors. And so the peer mentors were folks that had went through recovery, were homeless, some had addiction issues, but like they basically got to a healthy part of recovery. And a lot of times they would come to my office and I would say like, hey, you know what, do you want me to call someone? Do you want to go talk to someone over there? So they would bypass all of those probably, I would say on the surface, greater resources from a counseling standpoint, but they would want to talk to me. And so I would talk to them because like a lot of them felt like they felt really comfortable with talking to me. And I also knew to stay in my lane because like my girlfriend happens to be a licensed therapist. So basically, from that standpoint, I don't want to cross any boundaries where, that will harm anybody.
Has there been a major thing that has kind of shifted your point of view? Have you noticed something that maybe had a different weight on you when you started working with the homeless, when you started working with people who are struggling? Was there a misconception that was corrected for you, or did you kind of have a good idea of what to expect?
I actually had a kind of a good idea of what to expect, but like right away, there were several things that really made it I guess more enriching for me and more just willing to just dig in and help more. Probably one of the first couple, it was a couple that I met. They came in and they were, I think the gentleman was around 60 something and she was probably like right under him sometime where, and he had a heart condition and so unfortunately, what goes on in some of these camps is that like they steal from each other and stuff like that. So they came in that day and they're like they stole everything that they own. Their tent, they stole their tent, their belongings and stuff like that. And they were so they're looking for assistance. And so I said like, okay, Like, what do you need? Well, we're going to try to get. And so we had a good relationship with a thrift store. So we were able to get a couple items. And one of the things that I was like, of course, you guys know that Alaska is very cold. So they were like, she's like, I just want a really heavy blanket for him because, it's just like, it just gets so cold at night. So after work, I basically went around to all the thrift stores and stuff like that. And I found a sleeping bag. And so when I gave them the sleeping bag, of course they were so thankful, but like when they came every day of the week, they come by the office and just kind of just keep thanking me and thanking me. But like the third day, she told me a story of like how impactful the um sleeping bag was because what she said was that like we went to this certain park and we go to this park because when we put our cardboard down, the grass feels so good. And then it's like we'll get up to go dump the trash and it's like I'm walking across the grounds and it's frost and I'm like crunch, 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 and it's like so cold. But like when I get in that sleeping bag, it was like, oh my God, we're so warm and stuff like that. I just kind of like analyzed it and said, like, man, like we're in the United States of America, richest country in the world, and that people are happy to have a certain amount of grass to sleep on. They're sleeping outside, and like it's like bitter, bitter cold. So that just like kind of opened my eyes of like just the small pieces, the small things matter so much in this like so I basically it just made me go just harder to work with that and then like and that's where like the commission comes in as well because we advise the mayor and her team about, just like trying to keep the process of trying to help as humane as possible, as well as trying to get more resources, etc.
Absolutely. And I we talked about this on a episode or two ago, I think, Kevin,
Okay.
but well, the homelessness population has from 2023 to 2024 has risen by 18%. And I don't know what the stats are past that, but I doubt it's going down, especially with the way the economy is right now. But we were talking about like Washington State, where I live. They
Okay.
always talk about it having a huge homeless population. But being from Texas originally, I don't know if I entirely agree with that because Houston, for instance, does have a big homeless population, but we
Hmm.
deal with it much differently.
Yeah.
The law enforcement, they like herd them to a certain area under a
Yeah.
specific bridge, maybe where they're out of sight, out of mind. But in
Hmm.
Washington State, they don't do that as much. So, you see them everywhere you go.
Yeah.
I don't know how they handle it in Anchorage. I know that's Anchorage is a military town, is it not?
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. So we got a joint force base up here.
Is it Elmdorf Richardson?
Yep. Hmm. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
and I know a lot of times whenever there's a military base, you have at least a handful of homeless veterans. But
Yeah.
I was curious how y'all deal with it. Is it something like that, or is it something different, or how does the Anchorage community deal with that?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I like this very, very similar, but like, and that was one of the things I was talking to, actually, we were talking about at the commission last, because we have a meeting every month, but like last month, and the uh the thing that maybe surprises most people, but what makes it similar is that like I think everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to help, right? In pretty much in all the states. But when it actually comes to executing the help, that's where it kind of backs off because it's kind of like, okay, I want to either put a camp over here, you guys can go to this camp, but I don't want you to have this camp near my neighborhood. So then, so then it's kind of like what happens here is there are camps, and then the camps keep getting pushed around. So people get pushed around. And then when you talk about like the law enforcement, one of the things here is that like, and I'm not saying anything bad about law enforcement, but like the fact is that the homeless population, they don't want to deal with them because like basically it's not a pleasant experience. And then like what's unique, of course, about Anchorage is that space is very limited already. So the because like, you know, you imagine, you know, most of the building materials have to be shipped up here. So housing is very pricey. And then like with the shelters year round, I think we have about 300 beds in the shelters, and that surges up to about 500 during the winter. But there's probably roughly 2,000 folks that are homeless. So that's a quite a bit of people that are like really out in a tent in minus 20, minus, you know, types of weather. So it's very so that's probably the unique part, but like a lot of it is very similar. Now, I will say that the city has done some good things where we did pilot some tiny homes recently, and that was helpful. The issue again comes back to economics because actually I was a part of a team that was actually bidding to provide a solution for this tiny home initiative that they had. So, and the tiny homes that we were providing were built by this company called Extreme Habitat, and basically they build homes for like the North Slope, if you've heard of that, where they're or drilling oil and stuff like that. So, but the homes, they were modular homes, and they were still under budget. And so, but like they have, of course, a bathroom, a toilet, shower, everything, a bed and stuff like that. Now, the tiny homes, they only have the bed. So you have to come outside and go to a building to, you know, take a shower or, you know, go to the bathroom. And so now some folks will say, hey, well, it's better than being in a tent. Yes, true, but like you're in Alaska. So um, imagine, I mean, you guys can go back to being in the field, and if you're in a cold climate, like, you know, going to the bathroom, getting out of that extreme cold weather sleeping bag is quite a challenge. But yeah, so that's kind of like the landscape of homelessness here.
You get a lot of public support for programs there, or I mean, I know locally we have a local Facebook group that's kind of hateful towards our homeless population.
Okay.
Is it different? Is it different in Anchorage? Do you have more public support to solve the issue, or do you still have your? I mean,
Hmm.
everyone's going to have their haters, but like, do you find like there's more support for helping alleviate the homeless problem, or do you still struggle against public support?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of support for it, but I think it like comes back to that first thing that I said, like everybody's on board, but then like not in my neighborhood and not where I'm at because like there's a couple areas that like were really probably seem to be really good locations. And like I do understand their point of view for sure. One thing that we've been talking about is what we call sanction camps. And so sanction camps are just like really, you know, trying to have some security and got to figure out like how you're gonna like who gets in and who gets out, and do you have dangerous people out there, or do you have people that are on addiction, stuff like that. So it definitely is comes very complex really quick. But yeah, but there seems to be a lot of support. But like I said, like I think that when it comes to the rubber hits the road, though, that's where you kind of get like a little bit of a drop off. Yeah. So,
Well, it's been great talking to you today, Marvin. I wanted to ask one last thing, and
okay.
I'm going to ask this of Kevin too, because I know you do advocacy for the Legion, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Marvin, are there any resources either for, mental health or homelessness, whether it be in your local area or what have you, that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, I would say, well, Alaska 211 is basically like if you dial that number, you're basically gonna be at least connected to a lot of different resources. I think so you at least be able to reach out to that. So So yeah, I would definitely say that if anybody in Alaska, especially even Anchorage or even across Alaska, if you call those 211, you'll be connected with different resources. So yeah.
And Kevin, I know that you said, I don't know if it's mental health or homelessness or otherwise, but what are some good resources that you have?
Oh man, so if you are a veteran and you are experiencing homelessness, every VA hospital has a homeless coordinator. If you can get internet on your phone or device, you can look up who that is at the closest VA hospital to you. You can call them. Every VA, at least in the central part of the country that I know of, has temporary housing for veterans. Um, and if you need to file a claim, we go out to those places. Here in central Missouri, it's in Columbia. It's a place called Welcome Home. They have buildings for families, they have buildings for single veterans. There's a women's only building for victims of MST, that's military sexual trauma. And we go out, I'll go out there and sit in the day room and I'll help them file claims. But you've got to reach out. You've got to look up the information. It's different for every VA hospital. Additionally, there are social workers there that can file requests to make sure that you get not just lodging, but food. Most VA hospitals now also have food pantries included in them. And if you find your local veteran service officer through the American Legion, the VFW, the DAV, they can connect you. Like if you were to contact me and say, I am in Missouri, I need a home, I'm hungry, I know exactly who to put you in touch with that minute, that I can solve that problem for you same day.
I appreciate that, Kevin. Well, Marvin, it has certainly been a pleasure speaking with you today,
Right.
and uh, I hope it's been a pleasure for you, man.
It surely has, and I really appreciate you guys having me on. So thank you. Thanks again. All right.
Absolutely. You know, if you did like the episode, I do want to encourage you to subscribe to our channel. It supports us. I'm Kevin Price,
Kevin Reed.
and thank you for joining us again on Tactical Pause.